And I'd like to talk with you today about the 5 rules, or one set of 5 rules for living a great quality life.
Yeah.
And they're not original rules, but they're actually pretty good, aren't they?
Yeah.
So let's look at the rules. So number 1, turn up.
Turn up.
For me, life is not a spectator sport.
No.
But actually, if you're not present, if you're not involved in it, then nothing's going to happen, is it?
Yeah. No, I mean, if you just hide away, then you will have a very, very dull, boring, worthless life. First thing you've got to do, and it's tough, isn't it, to turn up? Especially, as you're growing up and you're getting sort of used to your own skin. I mean, you've almost got to turn up into your own skin first, really, to live a good and
I think that's a really good point. For me, turning up is not just about having a physical presence.
Yeah.
There are lots of people who are physically there,
yes,
but actually they've not turned up.
Yes.
They're not open. They're not emotionally involved.
Yes.
That they have closed themselves down. This isn't going to change me. I am as I am.
Yes.
I'm not actually here to take part.
Yes. Yes, it's perfectly possible to be present physically and not to have turned up.
Yes.
And it's a choice as well, isn't it? Because the point about saying turn up is inherent within that is that you do have a choice not to turn up.
Yes.
But it's a pretty awful choice to
But
make,
I think
isn't
it's so often done unconsciously that people do not recognise actually what they're doing.
Yeah.
But also they don't recognise that there is a choice to turn up.
Yeah. Yeah.
I believe, and so often it's fear that keeps people in that place where they haven't turned up.
Yeah.
Because if they do turn up, then people expect something of me.
Yes.
I might not measure up.
Yes.
I will have to leave myself exposed and vulnerable, and that's scary. And so they'll close themselves off. They might walk as if through sleepwalking, but they're not actively actioning being part of that situation.
Yeah. And when I think of that rule of turn up, I think of, in terms of simple terms like, the invite to that party or the invite to speak somewhere, or,
yes,
where you've got a choice of do I go or do I not? And I think actually often, as the film Yes Man suggests, you should turn up. You should give it a go.
And the thing is, very often that there'll be things in life that you think, I'm not sure if I'm going to like that, or I'm fearful about trying something new because I might not be good straight away. But actually, as soon as you do turn up, as soon as you are part of what is going on, you learn actually that it's quite good, and that the more you do it, the better it feels.
Yeah, because the opposite of turning up is to be absent.
Yes.
And does anyone want to end their life saying, well, I was absent? What does that mean if people sit and think for a moment about, I was absent? I think sometimes thinking about the negative side of something is a way of getting a quicker focus on what you actually mean by the instruction to turn up.
Yes.
I think if you got to the end of your life and you generally said, well, I didn't turn up, I was absent for most of it, that would be a terrible, terrible thing.
I'm reminded, if you put it into the professional context, of how many people would turn up to a meeting, and their seeming purpose was to avoid engaging in the meeting, because if they engaged, it meant that they would probably go away with another job to do. Or they failed to engage because if I engage, then I'll have to take responsibility for my contribution, my thinking.
Yeah.
I will put myself in a position where I can be judged.
Yeah.
And I think very often that when people don't turn up, and this is as true in a family setting, if I don't turn up, then I won't be judged.
Yeah.
But actually that's based on a false premise.
Yes. And it leads on to rule number 2. And all of these rules actually sort of follow
they're
one another,
interconnected, aren't they?
Yeah.
They are layered, and they're like a bowl of spaghetti, really.
Yeah, because rule number 2 is be present.
Yeah.
So that sort of written into that is, do you have to turn up first? And when you've turned up, be present.
Yeah.
So don't come along to that meeting and just say, wow, I was bodily there, but I wasn't listening, and I didn't actually take part. Value the time that you have In fact, you could argue, just by being born, you've turned up. Now you have the choice of being present or not.
And for me, being present is about being present in terms of enjoying the moment. And we talked quite a lot about that in these shows. But also that being present means that you take responsibility for what you say and how you say it and when you say it, what you do and how and when you do it, whether you do nothing or say nothing at all. But the being present is actually, actively taking responsibility for what you do.
Be aware. Develop your awareness. Super tune your awareness. Be here. And
part of that for me is take responsibility for your own emotional well-being. Don't rely on other people to make you happy or to make you sad or whatever. Own your own emotional well-being. And be present in terms of choosing whether you want to be happy or not, whether you want to make the most of every moment or not. That is an active choice. But so many people drift along and they believe that by not engaging, they're not making the choice. They don't need to take responsibility. I think the opposite is true.
My husband tends to call those kinds of decisions, and the people who live their lives around those decisions, slightly amoebic people, the ones that sort of float around with apparently no corks bobbing on the ocean type of life, where they're sort of getting taken by the current somewhere, but they sort of don't really know if that's where they wanted to go anyway. And it is a way to live life, obviously, but you are at the behest of third-party forces, aren't you? The tides.
Inevitably, our lives are to some extent governed by the politics of where we live, by the people that we live with, where we work and so on. But that doesn't take away the fact that we have a choice how we are going to be present. So you can live in the most extreme of circumstances, but you still actually have some choices.
It can be quite revolutionary and slightly sort of threatening, actually, to hear it for the first time. I remember the first time I really got that point of, you have a choice, Rachel. I've gone on a training course, and the only two things I remember about it was, he said, the human brain is very visual. The only thing you'll remember from this course is that I'm wearing yellow socks. And he showed us the yellow socks. But I did remember another thing, which is, he said, you have a choice. Nobody can make you angry. You choose anger as a reaction to something that somebody has done, but you have many other choices in your arsenal to do. So do not use the phrase, you made me angry, or you made me this, as tempting as it is to hand over responsibility. It is absolutely fundamentally your choice in every single second of your life.
I'm reminded of when I was a very young teacher, we were doing drama. One of the exercises that we would do with the children was to sit as a pair facing one another. And person A would have not allowed to touch, but to do anything to make the other person laugh. And person B was to resist laughing. And how good some children were at resisting. Put that into the context that people are trying to wind you up. More often, they're winding you up because they're busy doing their stuff rather than they're trying to wind you up. The problem with it is it becomes a habitual way of being, doesn't it? And you're triggered more and more easily into that place of anger. For me, every negative emotion has a purpose, and the purpose is it's time to do something different.
And if you go back to the rule, which is be present, if in being present you are acknowledging that others may not be achieving that rule, then that further informs your ability to make choices
and your choices to let them get on with their stuff, or to intervene and attempt to make them more conscious.
Because I think by living the being present, you naturally will model behaviours that actually the other person is, I think, on a sort of instinctive soul level, is going to understand that you're behaving in a higher self, higher vibrational mode, and you'll sort of pull them to that.
I wonder whether many people would actually conceptualize it in terms of a higher vibrational mode. But I think what does happen is that if you are working or being in a family and there are things going on, and that you engage in the drama and the chaos, all you get is bigger drama or chaos. Whereas if you choose consciously that that's not going to be the way you're going to be present, and act in a different way, that modelling then stops the fundamental habitualness of that other person. It pulls them up. Oh, this is something different. What's going on? So you take people out of the circle.
Yes, exactly.
So on to our third,
Number 3,
which is
speak your truth.
Now I know there are so many people who find that difficult, and I want to make the distinction between speaking your truth is not an excuse for being rude, hurtful, difficult. I worked with a woman when I first became a head, and she would, her view was, I'm blunt northerner, I speak as I find, I speak my truth. And actually what she used that as an excuse to be critical, unkind, very, very destructive. For me, speaking one's truth is about, in a sense, it's the speaking to you, and being clear about what is my truth, and not engaging in speech or activity with others which puts my truth at the back because I want to please or because I don't want to upset. And there are ways of speaking your truth, and I don't believe in doing it aggressively, but I think there are ways of speaking your truth which do not diminish the other person, but just say, actually, this is my truth. This is what's important to me. And actually, you're entitled to your opinion, but it doesn't have to be mine.
Yeah, I think the main message for this rule for me is you have to work out what the truth is. It's down to those individual microseconds that are passing you by, and what is my truth now versus what is my truth in the next second.
And I think that's really important, because our truth, our fundamental values, I don't think change.
No.
But I think the way in which we perceive those are manifest, and how we see ourselves and the world changes. If it didn't, we'd still be living in caves.
Absolutely.
So I think Art Geiser, who does energetic NLP, one of the things that he taught me, actually I found really helpful, was his expression, it's the truth of today. That as new information comes in, as I develop and grow, so my truth will expand and may change dramatically. My truth about myself has changed dramatically since I stopped thinking of myself as I did when I was 14. So my relationship with me is based now on a completely different set of truths. One which was very destructive, and now one which is much more constructive and positive.
And it's interesting. I sort of relate this back to my writing and the quote of there's no such thing as a perfect sentence, only a true sentence. And I often think about that often people, when they think about the truth, they think of this like perfect, up on a pedestal, everybody will get it. And actually, no, there's no such thing about perfection when you talk about truth, because it is so personal, so variable, so connected to you, and not necessarily true for anybody around you, but is no less valuable for that. And
I think for me, the key word is raw truth. Because, how you present in the world, your beliefs are yours, and you are absolutely entitled to them. However, it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody else has got to agree with you.
No.
And that doesn't diminish your truth, nor does it expand their power.
No,
it only expands their power if you give them that power.
And the other thing I think is really important about this rule is the active verb of speak, because it is very possible to have truths, to understand them, but to never make them anything other than just sort of within yourself.
So it's the articulation.
You have to, it's part of sort of the turning up and being present to formal rules. in order to fulfill the rule, you have to speak, you have to do something active about it. And I do think that is about living an authentic life that is, integral to your values. So you have integrity to yourself.
Interestingly for me, it's not only about the speaking, it's about, the saying action speaks louder than words.
Oh, yes.
For me, it's about the behaviours. And often you don't necessarily need to articulate with words.
No, true.
But embodying your truth. And I think that's particularly true around things like love, compassion, care.
Yeah.
Lots of people talk a good talk.
Yes.
But it's in the action that they're speaking their truth.
Yes.
And so, obviously you need both, but I think it's really interesting one that there are so many people who talk a good talk, but actually they're not authentic. They're not being their genuine best selves. They're posturing. Right.
Yes.
And in a way, I think that, when you look at the fourth rule of living a great quality life is do no unnecessary harm.
Yeah.
And I think the way in which we speak our truth, I think it's really important that we recognise that divisions, and we live in a world which is so divided.
Yeah, the media feeds on polar views.
It does. And if you look at fundamentalists of any sort, they are so convinced that they are right. They would probably argue, I'm speaking my truth. Therefore, it's all right. But it has to be seen in conjunction with do no unnecessary harm. Now, I suspect that they would argue that this is not unnecessary harm.
It is a relative term.
So if you're Ku Klux Klan, for example, or ISIS, their view of what's unnecessary would be very different to yours or mine.
Yes.
So for me, it's about, being conscious about that every action or lack, every word or lack has the capacity to hurt and harm. And being mindful of that in living my truth, I do not want to do harm to other people.
Yeah, I sort of learnt this rule a little bit from one of the shamans called Ross Heaven, a fantastic shamanic teacher, actually. And he was dealing with several people who, very spiritual, love and light type people who struggled with the concept of what humanity does to the planet and in living their lives, how they do so much harm. And he said, look, humans, we kill things all the time just by breathing in. You kill things, the microbes in the air.
Isn't it the James sect?
Yes.
Who, they'll brush the floor so they don't kill an ant and so on.
Yes.
Yes.
So just by existing, I'm afraid you have impacted the environment in that sense. So you have to sort of come to a certain amount of acceptance that you will do harm in life. You will. I think the point about it, though, is that doing harm should not necessarily stop you from speaking your truth if that is what you truly need to do and you made sure that, it fits with your values. But it is not an edict to just ruin other people's lives. They were not saying, hey, those murderers out there, they were just speaking their truth. It is about speaking your truth, but doing no unnecessary harm.
Yes.
Now, I know that I've made decisions in my life that have hurt other people, but it was so necessary for me in order to be truly myself that I had to harm those people in that way. And I hope I did it in such a way that I didn't over-create the hurt in that sense.
And let's qualify that by causing harm, causing upset because you removed yourself from a marriage that wasn't working, for example.
Exactly. Yeah.
We're not talking about,
I didn't take a knife to anybody.
No. Glad to hear it. So, all of these things are open to people qualifying them to come to their own view of what they are.
Yes.
Ultimately, to live a great quality of life, sorry about the noise, we've now got a helicopter passing over, that it's really important that I think for everybody that you actually consciously think about these things rather than just going through life without considering what is your truth, how do you speak that truth in a way that doesn't hurt other people, or if it does, that you minimise that hurt?
Yes, because I know that a lot of my growing up was dictated by messages around avoid conflict because it will hurt people,
Yeah.
or you will get hurt.
Yes.
And that is a way of not being present and not turning up.
Yeah.
And so in order to learn that actually, in order to get to the point to accept that actually sometimes I may do harm, and that actually I have to be okay with it, as long as I can feel truthful and know that it isn't too great a hurt, it isn't beyond reasonable in the sense of whatever truth I'm speaking.
Yes. And I think that brings us on to the final step, which is let things go.
This is the hardest rule.
So if somebody has hurt you, recognizing that if you hold on to that hurt, it's like you taking the poison and expecting them to die.
Yes.
That if you've done something wrong, forgiving yourself, forgiving others.
Yes.
Learning the lesson.
Yes.
And then letting it go and moving on.
Yes.
Recognizing the behaviors that have been destructive in the past to yourself and to others, and changing those to become much more constructive. But having learnt the lesson, it is time to let it go. Because if you don't, that old stuff will continue to colour your present and your future in a really destructive way. Now, that isn't about it's done, I take no responsibility for it. And I think it's really important that we identify this is absolutely taking responsibility for what you've done.
Yes.
If you can put it right, absolutely do so.
Yes.
But if you can't put it right, then learning the lesson and making sure that you don't do it again is really important. And then the final bit, let it go.
Let go. There's a great passage in, I think it's the Celestine Prophecy, where the main character is, running for his life, basically. And he finds himself sort of, attached to a cliff, clinging on by his fingertips. And he looks up and he thinks, how the hell am I going to get to safety up there? And he looks below and there's a raging river below him. And he gets the message from Spirit to let go. And he's arguing, what? I can't let go. He's literally clinging, but he's totally stuck. He can't go up. He doesn't really want to go down into the river. What's he going to do? Hold on there for the rest of his life? But the message keeps coming, let go, let go. And eventually he does decide to let go. And he falls into the raging river. And it's a little bit uncomfortable, for sure. But very quickly, the raging river turns into a calm. And he's drifting down the river to where he needs to be next. So I think the let go rule is really very important in terms of the main message in